In the Gun, episode 38 here of ITG. It's time to talk some moving and shaking on the WVU football coaching staff. I am Wesley Euler with the best teammates in the business, Owen Schmidt, the runaway beer truck, and Jed Drenning, the signal caller. This episode of Bet Online brought to you by, this episode of ITG brought to you by our friends at Bet Online. Bet Online remains your number one source for all your sports betting needs this season. Everything from the NFL to college sports and even esports. You'll always find the latest odds, matchup information, player news, and game trends at Bet Online. Bet Online features live betting, free contests, and live scores for almost any sport or game imaginable. It's the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite leagues and events. So head to betonline.ag to join and receive your 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit. Make sure to use the promo code BELIEVE when you sign up to receive your rewards. That's BLEAV at Bet Online, where the game starts. Gentlemen, staff moving and shaking. We've got some news as it relates to WVU hiring an offensive coordinator finally. We've got some reports that a former member of the Mountaineer family is heading home for a coaching opportunity. Before we get to all of that, some headlines elsewhere to get us started here. And we know we've discussed this a little bit. We've mentioned this. We're still waiting on the Big 12 schedule. Big 12, one of the few conferences that is still not released its football schedule for the 2023, the upcoming season. Jed, at the risk of sounding redundant here, because I feel like we've said this already, it does seem like we won't have to wait much longer.
I told you guys before we started, I'm almost ready to start an Andy Dufresne style letter writing campaign to the Big 12 to get my prison library books. I mean, what's going on here? I'm going to end up on my knees in the rain just thanking the good Lord once the Big 12 schedule finally surfaces and is made public. We've discussed it before. I would imagine what's complicating the matter is there's behind the scenes maneuvering going on the Texas-Oklahoma side with, at least I surmise, with the powers that be in the Big 12. They're bound to stay through 2025 contractually, but there's other ways that they can get out sooner. What concessions might be made if they get out as soon as following the 24 season or following the 23 season? Well, if they get out following the 23 season, it makes sense that could impact the schedule in the 23 season, because we already know everybody's not playing everybody. It's going to be a 14-team league for that one season at least. So we're going to stagger it. How they stagger it, how they're structured, nobody really seems to have an answer. But if Oklahoma and Texas are going to bow out even earlier, there was chatter, guys, that we talked about this maybe a couple of weeks ago, that maybe one of the things they would do to help financially make the Big 12 whole, tied to an early exit to the SEC, would be play a handful of what would then be non-conference games against Big 12 opponents while they're in the SEC, whether it's Oklahoma, Oklahoma State with Bedlam, whatever it might be. But I would imagine that's what's holding this up. But people are trying to make schedules. I mean, people are trying to put accommodations together. And I don't just mean teams. I mean fans and on down the line. Sure, it's not as if you need 18 months to do this, but you need a little bit of time to put these things together. And structurally, especially when you're talking about a league that spans Provo, Utah to Morgantown, West Virginia, to Orlando, Florida, there's a lot of travel involved. And if fan bases are eager to maybe hop on a plane and take in a game, well, they need to start making plans. People have weddings, right? Yep, there's different things that happen in life that you're trying to work around. So come on, Brett Yormark, I know you're burning the midnight oil to get this done, but it's been delayed since early December. Normally it's December 1st or so.
It's been about a month and a half. Right. Yeah.
We're 6 weeks in and now it's bumped again, but that's my take on it, guys. What do you think?
Yeah, let's go. I actually want to get to a couple games this year. I'd like to.
Road games?
A couple road games. I haven't been able to travel.
State college, baby.
Yeah, I mean, that's happening.
He means Big 12.
Yeah, you're talking like real road trips, not just a few hours.
Well, no, hold up. State college is a road trip because that's a absolute.
That's probably a hike for you, isn't it? Yeah.
It's going to be a hike for me.
It's only about 2 hours for me, 2:15. It's not too bad. But
that's another shot at. Go ahead, Wes.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I know the Big Ten, the ACC, a couple other conferences. You're right, Jed. I mean, their schedules have been out for 6 or 7 weeks at this point.
Yeah, and normally ours is. But yeah, when I'd love if we had another opportunity. I don't know how the schedule is going to fall next year. There's going to be teams we play and teams we don't. But if we get another shot at going to DKR at some point in the next year or two, I'd recommend that, for sure. Mm-hmm. We could hook up down there and you might put their barbecue to shame with the stuff you make, but But
Yeah.
there's a couple cool spots that I definitely recommend. But I
Yeah.
can't do that until a schedule comes out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No, I'm looking forward to it. And, gives us something to look forward to for the next year. Get ready. It's
Yeah.
time, man. You got to start
Sure is.
thinking now. We've had our woes, okay?
Yep.
Season's been over for a minute now. All right,
Slap
time to
up
get
that
back
new
in the grind.
schedule on the wall in the weight room and let's get after it.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, it's time.
No, it certainly is, and hopefully by the next time we record, we'll have some answers. But certainly sounds like at least by the end of January, there should be something coming down the pipeline here. At least maybe the good news of that is the Big 12 spreading it out for us, so we'll have plenty of content for all of you good people here on the show. Speaking of headlines that relate to the Big 12, this is certainly a pretty big one. We all know, we discussed this on our last episode, that Garrett Riley, younger brother of Lincoln Riley, offensive coordinator for TCU this past season, was on his way to Clemson to join Dabo Swinney's staff there in the Clemson Tigers. Well, it appears TCU has their replacement, Jed. It's another familiar name, if you will. Kendall Briles going to be the offensive coordinator for TCU for the Horned Frogs.
It is. It's interesting on a lot of levels, and I don't want to jump way out in the weeds with the controversy that's surrounding it or not surrounding it. I just know that
attached to the Briles name.
That's right, and the reception at TCU has been ambivalent at best, in part because of that, right? But what interests me more so than that, it seems to have ruffled some feathers, and I'm sure I'm not part of that down there, but what interests me is, and this is something Wes, you and I were talking about, when you look at Sonny Dykes and the place that he's at in his career. Of course, his pedigree's on the offensive side of the football. We all recognize that. He learned and came up as an air raid guy. Okay. But it wasn't until very recently, in the last handful of years, the latter portion of his time at SMU into taking the TCU job, that he seems to have been more deferential from that side of things as a play caller, as somebody putting an offense together, deferential towards someone else. And that someone else was, of course, Riley, right?
Right.
So to me, the biggest thing is it seems he's arrived at that spot in his career where now he kind of got accustomed to superintending the program at large, not micromanaging an offense, and finding an OC that he could lean on and could have expectations attached to, and not necessarily call every play and dial every single thing up, and be more of a CEO type. And obviously, it's worked out well for them. They had tremendous success this year with this magical run they went on. So he sees that was effective. So he doesn't want to just hire another guy. He could plug another guy in. He knows the air raid well enough. He could hire any host of air raid guys, from Jake Spavital, who's on down the line, whoever it might be. There's a lot of air raid guys on that tree that he could easily bring in, but still behind the scenes run the show himself, right?
Sure.
It seems apparent he wants to hire somebody with enough impetus and enough of a pedigree. And when you look at what Briles has done since he went out on his own, since he left Baylor, of course, he was pass game coordinator there, and we all know what they were doing on the offensive side of the ball. They're going to spread you out. They're going to get you to commit to defend the run, defend the pads. We all understand how effective that was. But from there, he went to Florida Atlantic with Lane. He even crossed paths with, I think, for the one season with Clint, who was on staff there with him. He was the associate head coach, the offensive coordinator, coaching the quarterbacks at Houston. From there to Florida State, and of course, more recently at Arkansas. So he's a guy who can hold his own from a game planning standpoint. He's obviously a guy who's caught a lot of football, and it seems like that's what Sonny Dykes is in the mix for. So that's the interesting part to me, is that Sonny Dykes has now arrived at a point in his career, and why not, after the season they just had, that he's like, look, I'm an offensive guy. I'm a former offensive coordinator. That's how I got every job I ever had. But now I've had tremendous success with letting somebody else run the offensive show and kind of just helping out. And I want to continue that model. So that appears what they're trying to be, what they're trying to do in Fort Worth. And I think it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, it is interesting. It certainly is. And that's a good breakdown by you. And this is going to be something to keep an eye on, Owen, right? Because this is a big year for a program like TCU. When you have a dream season, that's great. It's amazing for the fan base. It's amazing for the program. But I think you can easily argue what you do the next season is just as important, right? Do you continue to stay relevant? Do you continue to, not go back to the college football playoff and be a top 10 team or something like that, but do you stay in the national conversation? Do you not have a big drop off, right? Kind of like what you guys did, Owen, right? You have that dream season. You beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, and then the next season you come back and you maybe not quite the year you wanted to have, but you still win the Gator Bowl. You still win, what, 9 games, I believe, that season it was. Like, it was good to continue to carry that momentum, and then boom, the next season, top ranked team the entire year, win the Big East, go and smoke Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl, all those things. That, to me, like, TCU's kind of in that point right now. They just had an amazing season. They're losing a lot of guys. They're losing their offensive coordinator. Like, this is a big year for them to keep it together and, yeah, maybe take a half step back, but still keep that, that elevated status that they have, that they've earned here as a program.
Well, absolutely. I mean, at least being the conference championship, at the end of the year. Obviously the national championship, that's the goal of every team, every year, you know what I mean? But to be competitive, to want to come back, to not know it was a fluke, right? You know what I mean? To know it was legitimized, whatever you want to say. But yeah, that's ultimately the program's goal going on for next year. And unfortunately they are losing some folks, but the whole mentality is to, it's to reload, not to rebuild. So,
right.
Hopefully they have their people in place. That should be everybody's, when they're building a team, you should always be thinking like that, because the rebuilding phase, kind of like, obviously kind of what we got stuck with with the transition between Neil and
Dana.
Dana,
Yeah.
You lose, it just hurts you so much. You know what I mean? It just hurts you so much. So having that positive outlook, and for a team like TCU, you got to win. You got to get back there. That's how you legitimize your program. That's how, in today's world, I think, you keep a powerful team.
And I think that the sustainability piece of it, guys, comes at a critical time for TCU for another reason. And that is the conference is at somewhat obviously of a crossroads, right? There's going to be a significant change in the power structure of the league. You have Oklahoma and Texas departing. Now, Oklahoma has the success on the field. Texas has had the success on the business side of things, the biggest budget of all the players in the league. So with those two teams departing, people are trying to settle in and understand in the new look Big 12, absent Texas, absent Oklahoma, what's going to be the best job, the best head coaching job in the new look Big 12. And TCU is one of those jobs that is certainly in the mix right there with Baylor for a host of reasons. Baylor has proximity to talent. They have oil money. TCU has unlimited resources. They're a private school. They're adjacent to so much talent. You can't swing a dead cat by the tail without hitting a ton of talent right in that Fort Worth DFW zip. So they're in the running because of all the money tied to the school. I mean, I remember our first trip down there in 2013. I probably told you guys this before. Dana and I were down on the field during pregame, and I'm looking at the luxury suites they just renovated the stadium at Amon Gene Carter with, and they had 160 or 165 million dollars tied up in those suites. And I asked Dana, I said, how'd they pay for that? He said 6 boosters cut checks. Well, welcome to TCU. That's the kind of money they have. So when you wield that kind of money, you're going to be a potential player in terms of how your coaching job is viewed among your conference peers. So I think it's a critical crossroads in that sense too. Can they assert themselves and take that step forward? And can Sonny Dykes show, out of all the places in the new Big 12, this is the place you're best set up for, with the resources, with the proximity to talent, for all these reasons, to win and have more success than all the others that might be challenged in ways that we're not. So I think it's also interesting in that respect.
Well, that's well said. Absolutely. Certainly plenty to keep an eye on there as we roll along in the offseason, as next season plays out. As we wrap up this headline segment here, I should say, before we talk about some staff news for WVU football, important to note here, Jed, just for our listeners, the transfer portal has officially closed. Well, the window to enter the transfer portal, I should say, right? Now, you're still going to see guys committing here over the coming weeks, right? But at this point, if your name's not in the transfer portal, you'll have to wait until the next cycle, correct? We're kind of explain to everybody where we're at in this timeline.
Okay, well, what it means is, and this is the new part of this that was put in place this year, the 2 windows, okay? The first window, as we know, it started December 5th, okay, and it was open and active through December 18th. Okay. So if you entered during that time, you can at any point throughout the spring semester commit to another school. Okay. There's nothing stopping you from doing so because now you're kind of hanging in limbo at your current school. You're no longer part of that program, or at least you're in the portal while you're at your current school. The timeline, from a timeline standpoint, the consideration right now would be there's kind of a race if you want to get enrolled for the spring semester and take part in
Sure.
spring ball.
Sure.
That's what you're up against. But just because you don't, like for instance, one of the premier linebackers that just became available in the last couple of days recently from Louisville is in the portal. And there's talk of West Virginia being one of 2 or 3 schools, depending on the report you look at. Some people have him going to Ole Miss. Some people have him only visiting Ole Miss. Some people having, 2 or 3 visits over the course of the next 2 or 3 weeks. Well, he's still exploring his options because he entered the portal before January 18th. He can do that. Now, remember, you're going to have another window that opens after spring ball, which is May 1st to May 15th, which I kind of look at it like this, guys. If I'm a player and I do have any interest in entering the portal, okay, don't you think you'd be best served to get there in time to enroll at your new school by spring ball? Because otherwise, why not just wait until May 1st? Right?
Right.
I mean, why get out January 15th just to stay where you're at, miss spring ball at large, and I'm saying enroll by the summer, which you'd be doing if you didn't get in the portal by this January 18th window closing. So that's the part of it that's still in play. Okay. But yeah, just understand the window has closed as of January 18th. You can't actively enter the portal right now, but there's still a ton of kids out there in the portal. I mean, I've seen numbers. I think the numbers counting everybody who's committed, everybody who hasn't at the FBS level, some of them 1,900 or so. Now, again, there's different ways to parse that out as you work your way down. A lot of those kids are going to get other opportunities out of their FBS schools. A lot aren't. A lot are going to transfer down to the FCS level. A lot are going to go down to the D2 level, even the D3 level, some at the NAI level. There's going to be a small percentage that probably don't play anywhere as a result of what happened. But the portal window itself was open December 5th through January 18th. They could enter. They don't have to commit. But once they're in there, now they can float around as a free agent. The next window doesn't open until May 1st. Now, for West Virginia purposes, what that also means is it's unlikely that you're going to see somebody. In other words, if somebody was going to enter the portal from the roster, in other words, internally leaving, okay, that would have most likely happened in this phase by January 18th, okay, because that's what their opportunity to do it. Because if they're going to do it now, their next opportunity is May 1st to see how spring ball unfolds. And so that's kind of where it's at. But we're going to continue to pursue talent. Just like this linebacker we talked about, there's a host of others out there that are still uncommitted, that are going to be storylines that people are following on the national level. But what a strange new world. It's just such a strange new world to think that, again, from an eligibility standpoint, you can be a kid. Let's say you're, I don't know, at Texas Tech, for instance, and you want to transfer to Michigan State, okay? You don't know that yet. Well, if you're currently enrolled at Texas Tech and you enter the portal on January 12th, you're no longer on the football team at Texas Tech, but you're still enrolled as a student. So you're meeting your academic obligations, right? So you can still have your eligibility hours to transfer in the summer to Michigan State or wherever else. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
There's
absolutely.
the football part of it, and then there's the academic part of it. And as long as you're enrolled as a student, maintaining your academics, and you're going to be, made whole from an academic side, well, that's what's playing out.
Yeah. No, it's a lot to balance. It is. Yeah. It's a whole new world that we're all still kind of trying to get our finger on the pulse of, and I think we're starting to figure it out a little bit, but obviously a long way to go here. But that's a nice timeline laid out there by Jed. Before we talk some WVU staff news here, this episode also brought to you in part by our friends at Toothman. We all know cars cost less in Grafton, and big shout out to fan favorite here on the show, CJ Donaldson, who just signed an NIL deal with Toothman this week. So, hey, that's 2 of our favorite things on this program coming together. You love to see that. Make sure you're going to Grafton for all of your vehicle needs at Toothman Ford. Good friends here of this program. Gentlemen, the news that we've all been waiting for, there's been a lot of speculation. There's been a lot of rumors. There's been a lot of waiting, but we finally have an offensive coordinator in Morgantown, and it's a familiar name. It's a promotion. Chad Scott, he's taken his big league backs brand all the way to the OC position. And this to me, hey, like we had discussed some of the things, some of the possibilities. We know that there were some external candidates removed. We know that there's a lot that's gone into this process. But as it's played out in this regard, hey, all the guys on staff, if you're going to promote one of them, it feels like Chad Scott is the right decision here. I mean, he is just feels like every year he's done a consistent job of taking that running back room, getting them to improve. They always feel like they're on the same page. They always feel so bought in. You see those guys in that running back room, they get just as excited for their teammates making plays as they do when they make a big play themselves. I like the culture that Chad Scott has built in that room and amongst that group. Now let's see if he can do it with the entire offense.
I agree, Wes, 100%. Has a complete bright light around him. Very personable guy. Follow him on Twitter. Love what he puts out there, motivationally, daily almost. I think he's going to be a good influence for the team, and looking to see again, like you said, the production out of those backs. It's been nice to see ground game in Morgantown.
There's a magic element to Chad Scott, and you know what? I'm convinced there kind of always has been. Okay.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, let me jump in the time capsule here and take you all the way back to 2004. Miami was just leaving the Big East. Their final season in the Big East was 2003. So Miami came together, jumped into the ACC in 2004. They had a heck of a team. They were coming off a big Orange Bowl season where they beat Florida State the previous year, Larry Coker and company, Brock Berlin, Frank Gore, Roscoe Parrish. I mean, typical Miami talent, okay? Miami starts the season 6-0, right? They're number 4 in the country. They're cooking with gas, firing on all cylinders, right? They hit the road, go to Chapel Hill against a 3-win North Carolina Tar Heels team. What chance does North Carolina have, right? Well, one guy that said, I'll tell you what kind of chance I think they have, a pretty good one, was Chad Scott. Chad Scott against that Miami defense, we're talking John Beeson, Devin Hester, Brandon Merriweather. Again, typical Miami talent.
Yep.
Chad Scott, 25 carries, 175 yards. North Carolina, 31. Number 4 ranked Miami, 28. That's who this guy is. There's a magic. There's a magic to him, right? I mean, there's just an infectious magic to him. And it seems like everywhere he's been throughout the course of his career, whether he was at Troy back 07, 08 with Neal, he was coaching all Sun Belt players back then. Kenny Cathouse, Jawan Harris. Jawan Harris spent 7 years in the NFL. He moves to Texas Tech. Wes, this is probably before your time. Baron Batch, an old Steeler back. All right.
Oh, of course, I remember Baron Batch. Yeah,
again,
I mean, it was before I was working for the franchise, but yeah,
that's right. But you remember Baron Batch,
of course.
But you know, he did a lot with what was a pass-heavy Texas Tech football team. But here's what I find interesting too. He's bounced around and he's done a good job with whatever room he's ever been in charge of. And it hasn't always been the running backs room. He was tight end, kind of H-backs, hybrids at North Carolina for one run. But his running back room has always produced. Now, here's some names that I want you to be mindful of, because I remember when Neil Brown assembled his staff in 2019, one of the things that intrigued me most about Chad Scott was his pedigree, okay? You remember Marquell Blackwell? Okay. Marquell Blackwell was our running back coach for one season with Dana in 2018.
Okay.
Dana's last year. Marquell Blackwell was a quarterback at South Florida. Okay. Remember Tony Dews?
Yeah.
Tony Dews was our running back coach in 2017. He was a tight end from Liberty. And of course, we all remember Jawan, right? Jawan, for a stretch of 4 years, was our running back coach at West Virginia, right? Jawan, of course, was a quarterback at West Virginia. You had to go all the way back to 2012 when Robert Gillespie was a running back at Florida and then at Washington in the NFL to find a former running back actually coaching the position.
Yeah.
So I asked myself, when Chad Scott took over that room, I was like, this could be interesting. Where's this going to go? Okay. Where's this going to go? Now, the struggles we had were obvious in that 2019 season. They were historic from a run game standpoint. We had limitations in the roster. It was for a host of reasons. But what you did see over the course of the following offseason is you saw the O-line start to come together, and you certainly saw the running back room start to come together, led by what was at the time a bell cow in development in Letty. Letty became that bell cow. Letty became that steady presence that we needed. and instrumental in helping lead him to that role was Chad Scott. He made him an every down back. And Letty credits Chad Scott with doing that. Chad Scott always likes to say, look, it's natural to want to run the football, but it takes supernatural ability to block or catch the football. Well, that's what he instills in his guys. Now, fast forward past the loss of Letty Brown, the question became, what are we going to do? Here comes Tony Mathis. Here comes this converted kind of H-back from high school, and CJ Donaldson. We got this mix of guys who hasn't really arrived yet in Jackson, and you're looking at Jalen Anderson. Is he going to come around? Well, slowly but surely, that room was dinged up over the course of time throughout the season. And it seemed like every time we take a step forward, we took an apparent 2 steps backward. But the next week, here comes the production. You guys remember how concerned we were about, are we going to be able to, yeah, we did it against Pitt. Yeah, we surprised Pitt. They didn't see it come with the run game. Are we going to be able to do it against Virginia Tech? Because they're a true stout front seven. CJ Donaldson carved him up. Justin Jackson had a night, right? The depth in that room and how they enjoyed the successes of one another. And now we lose CJ. Okay. And we all remember how we felt about, what a dark cloud was over that, not just the program at large, but specifically that room. Well, here comes Tony Mathis against Baylor. He had a night, 163 yards, the best night of his career. So, again, we're at odds going into the Oklahoma State game, heading to Stillwater. What happens? Jalen Anderson steps up. It's just the depth of that room has been tremendous. So I do believe in a meritocracy. I'm a huge believer in that in every facet of life, including your coaching staff. And if you build success based on merit, okay, and what you've done, you should be rewarded. And Owen, what I like is, and I know how you felt about your running back coach. And ironically, he was a former tight end in Cal, right? He was a tight end. Okay. He wasn't running back, but I know what you thought of him, and I know what the guys in that room thought of him. And, the magic connection to that personality. He was just such a great guy. You wanted big things for him. You wanted to succeed for him. We've had position coaches like that. I felt like that about Jimbo. So when you play for a guy like that runs your room, there's a certain element of pride, that there's a competitive spirit in that room, and you see it. It infiltrates other activities throughout the course of not just the offense, but the team in general. Okay. So what I'm excited about, guys, is to now see that spillover, the possibility of that same competitive spirit that Chad Scott bred in that room bleed over into the offense at large, because now that connective tissue is going to extend with him owning this title beyond the running back room. That same personal connection he has with those kids, because they're like his own, it's now going to extend to an even deeper level than it already did to the rest of the offense. And now they're going to feel the same way about Chad Scott that running back room feels about Chad Scott. That's the part that excites me. So if you're looking at it schematically, look, I think we can creatively find ways to do things with wrinkles that are a little bit different than what
Triple option, Jed. Just say it. Run the ball 90 times a game, baby. Yeah, triple option.
That's what people are talking about. You get
run the damn ball.
Run the damn ball. Everyone's sitting in the stands like Sandra Bullock in The Blind Side. Run the dang ball.
But that's not the part that has me excited. The part that has me excited is Chad Scott now spilling over.
Yeah.
His ability to connect with people. With an opportunity to connect with the offense at large. That part excites me, because he is a guy who somehow, some way digs down and gets the best of anything he touches. And now he's touching the entire unit. That excites me. The entire offense.
He said unit.
Yeah, I did. In his wheelhouse. In his wheelhouse. So that's what excites me, guys, is I want to see that spill over. Where it goes from there. Yeah, again, we'll talk wrinkles later. There's plenty of time for that.
Sure.
Okay. But just my initial reaction is being around Chad. He just has this personality. He does. It's just, he might spend time with him and tell you. I can promise you he's such a fun guy, to play for. I mean, I can just tell you from 5 minutes sitting in the hotel every so often with him, just there's an air to him. And it's genuine what you see coming out of that room. The love and care that those guys give a damn about each other. They want to see each other succeed. And I'm excited about it for that reason. Let's set the football part aside. That's the reason I'm excited about it.
Yeah, man. I mean, like I said, he definitely pushes all the buttons for me. He's a feel good guy. I love what he does on the Twitter stuff, sending out those messages. Like I said, almost on the daily. I think he's going to be a a solid contribution to the team. And like you said, it'll spill over, man. You know what I mean? Just got to get those people in there. It's just how it works. It's infectious. You know what I mean?
Sure. I
So
mean, when you look at the room that's going to be on the offensive side, okay. Yeah, it's a rebuild, but who's not rebuilding? There's no doubt about it. But you start
yeah,
with this. You know what's not rebuilding with us is our offensive line. You know what's not rebuilding with us? The running back room.
yeah,
So
Exactly.
you build this thing from the inside out. Now
yeah,
you're going to have talented pieces on the perimeter. We work through recruiting. We work with the portal. We're trying to populate those pieces with that. We're excited about the two kids that we have coming back at the quarterback spot and the different dimensions that they might bring. Just give Chad Scott a chance to have a little more pixie dust on this thing, big picture, than what he's had previously as the run game coordinator, as a co-OC. Okay. And again, it's a guy that it from a continuity standpoint in times of crisis that matters. And this is a time of crisis. You're coming off a 5-7 season when we underachieved. This is a time of crisis. You need to produce. You need to produce now. So I like the idea that the guys in that room at least can finish each other's sentences. Now you're reshuffling roles. And speaking of reshuffling roles, Wes, take the floor.
Ah, yes. Well said there, Jed. I like how you do that transition. It appears now this is still in the reports phase. All right. We want to be real clear on that. Nothing finalized in terms of the university making any announcements just yet, but we should say very credible sources, and not just those in Morgantown, also those in Pittsburgh that cover the Pittsburgh Steelers, that are reporting that Blaine Stewart is going to join the WVU staff from the Pittsburgh Steelers, where he is currently assistant wide receivers coach. If that name sounds familiar to you, but maybe you're just having a little brain fart, maybe you're like, wait a second, Blaine Stewart, I know that name. That is the son of late Bill Stewart, former WVU head coach, former WVU, longtime WVU head coach, but former head coach, of course. Owen there in the Fiesta Bowl, his interim coach in Owen's last game ever in the old gold and blue. Blaine has spent a few years on the Steelers coaching staff under Mike Tomlin. This is his second year specifically working with the wide receivers. For those, again, too, that might be unfamiliar here, there's a long story we could get into, but Mike Tomlin and Bill Stewart had a relationship. Bill Stewart gave Mike Tomlin his first ever coaching job when Mike Tomlin was out of college at William and Mary. That was at Virginia Military Institute, VMI. Mike Tomlin, young guy, sleeping in the Stewart's basement. He always says, right, I was doing full-time work for part-time pay. That's how you got to start in this business. And, Bill Stewart, his little son, Blaine Stewart, Mike Tomlin, part of his rent there at the Stewart household is like changing diapers and feeding the baby. And here, you take care of the baby. Well, you fast forward 25 years later, Mike Tomlin's the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like I said, he gives Blaine his first job in the business. Pretty cool full circle moment there. And now it appears that Blaine, again, just reports at this point. But like I said, when you combine that there's people on the Steelers side of things that are reporting this and on the WVU side of things, it seems like it's pretty much a done deal. It sounds like he's going to coach tight ends. But pretty cool story. Listen, I know there is, Jed, you just alluded to some of this. You're coming off a 5-7 season where people are a little down on the program. Like, I think that's, it's not exactly the most optimistic fan base right now, but I think no matter where you're at, if you're somebody who loves WVU football all the time, if you're somebody who feels a little jaded right now because the results haven't been there the way you wanted them to the last couple of years, man, I still think you gotta think this is pretty cool. When you look at just a former head coach and a longtime coach and a West Virginian in Bill Stewart and Blaine Stewart, his son coming back to the program, and just the connection too from Bill giving Mike Tomlin his first job and Mike Tomlin giving Blaine his first job. Like it's just a really cool story to me, and one of those it's cliche, but football is family. Like, it really speaks to the brotherhood that is amongst these teams and these coaching staffs when you see I think a full circle moment like this.
absolutely, Wes. Absolutely. Man, Blaine's such a cool guy. Stoked for his opportunity with the Steelers. I know he's made the most of it. Um, he looks a lot like his old man at times.
Yes, he does.
You know what I mean? When you see him, and I think it's cool him coming back. I love to see him in action. I think, you know, tight ends, there might be a minor adjustment, but I think he's going to get it just fine. You know, Hey, football is pretty simple, man. Blocking, tackling, hitting, hustling. You know what I mean? So I
And
think he'll understand that. And I listen, man. He learned from one of the best.
he
You know what I
certainly
mean?
did. He certainly did. And I'll tell you guys this too. I mean, listen, I don't sit in the Steelers position meetings, although that would be pretty cool if I got a chance to do that. I don't sit in the meetings, but I get to spend a decent amount of time at practice. And I'll tell you this, those guys respect Blaine Stewart. Um,
Yeah.
everyone from Deontay Johnson, who's making $18 million a year and has been a Pro Bowler on that in that wide receiver group for the Steelers, to Juju Smith-Schuster when he was there, to a guy like George Pickens, who's now a rookie, to the journeymen that have played for the Steelers at the wide receiver positions, the Anthony Millers, guys like that. They respect Blaine. And I always love watching him at practice because, I mean, it's cool. Every time I'd walk past Blaine Stewart on the sideline at the Steelers facility, I'd be like, hey, this is pretty cool, man. Blaine Stewart, like this is pretty cool. So I was always kind of like, I would always be keeping an eye on him. And like I said, I'm not in their position meetings. I can't, I didn't play wide receiver in the NFL. Like I can't speak to all the intricacies of the position or anything like that. But what I can tell you from what I've observed is those guys respect him. They listen to him when he speaks. A lot of these guys are older than he is. A lot of these guys are making 20 times the money that he is, and they still listen to him. He still commanded that Steelers wide receiver core, and that to me it's always a good sign. When you've got the millionaire professionals from the 6-7 year veterans to the high draft pick rookies that are listening to you and really taking your teaching, I think that is always, Jed, a good indicator to me that, he's teaching, he's coaching. Those guys are picking up what he's putting down.
And to double back to the genuine nature of the family side of this, okay. I'll always remember. Of course, I remember where I was when I got the text about Stu. I'll never forget. In May of 2012, I'll never forget where I was. But I remember the following fall when Morgantown High opened its season. It was difficult for Blaine to not have Stu around. Okay. Mike Tomlin came to Morgantown and attended that game with Blaine. And I always thought that was just so super cool. And but he's a chip off the old block. He's also, as you touched on, earned the respect that you're speaking of. He's not just his dad's kid; he's his own man. And the last communication I got from Blaine was actually he messaged me, sent me a picture that he found of me and his dad together. And this would have been, I don't know, it was Thanksgiving last year, maybe. I mean, we don't keep in regular touch.
Sure.
So once in a while, we'll just reach out and dust things off. And so I reached out to him when this news was coming down, and I didn't expect an immediate turnaround. I haven't heard back from him yet. So I'm not in the breaking news business. I say that all the time, but I said, I definitely want to catch up. But either way, when you look at his history and the pedigree that he's established, first as a player and then as a coach, okay, was a heck of a receiver at Morgantown. Wasn't just another guy. Got some all-state recognition for the Mohegans. But then he goes to JMU. And what I think's neat at JMU is what he's famous for is a play that he made as the holder on the field goal team. You know where I'm going with this, Wes?
I do, of course.
Okay.
Well, I host a radio show with a fellow JMU football alumni.
That's
so
true.
I've heard
So
this. I've heard this story.
Yeah, there was he was the holder, a tie game. They're driving down to try and kick the go-ahead field goal, and they line up to do so. And there was a bad snap, but it wasn't fourth down, and there was a bad snap, and Blaine was savvy enough to grab the ball, jump to his feet, and spike it, and give them another chance to kick the field goal, which of course they did and won the game. So that just speaks to a football IQ.
That's a coach's son right there.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he goes from there to did some nice things at the University of Charleston. And I remember when I first heard that he broke into the ranks in the capacity that he initially did, which wasn't a full-time assistant with the Steelers, and worked his way up through that. But here's what I have to say about bringing a guy like Blaine back into the fold. Okay. Never underestimate a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid prospect, or in the modern era, a kid in the portal. When you're discussing brand equity and you're selling your program to them, never underestimate that they recognize what's genuine and what's not. and they see through a hollow message when you're selling something you don't believe in. I can promise you, Blaine Stewart is going to show up day one and sell the brand equity of the Flying WV like few others. It's in his DNA. It's him down to his core. He's going to be able to sell it. He's going to be able to preach it. He loves it. It's who he is. And kids are going to pick up on that. And I don't just mean on the recruiting trail, but I mean taking over that tight end room, if in fact that's a position that he does adopt. And let's not forget the swing man and all this that makes this possible was the flexibility of a guy like Sean Reagan. Hats off. Sean Reagan, longtime quarterback coach for Neil Brown at Troy and some other stops, was asked with the addition of Graham Harrell last year to take over that tight end room. So now you got some flexibility within your offensive staff to shuffle the pieces around and make them fit. But I'm terribly excited by the notion that Blaine Stewart can show up and sell with the passion and excitement of something that he truly believes in, to recruits, to players within the building, what it means to him. And again, credit to Neil Brown for recognizing that as well. Okay. Not only are you getting a significant coach that's also going to bring some value to the table. Okay. You don't think that a guy, when you're trying to reinvent certain dimensions conceptually of your offense and say, okay, well, we can't do things the same way as we did before. It didn't work. Our personnel is different. In addition to that, and you got a new offensive coordinator, it's your former run game coordinator, but you got your O-line returning, you're deep at running back. You don't think that a guy who's coached and took part in meetings with guys like Mike Tomlin and sat in staff meetings with those Steelers and game plan for people like Najee Harris and on the line, he's going to bring some value to those conversations as you're trying to be creative and think outside the box and figure out who you're going to be from an identity standpoint on the offensive side. I don't see what's not to like. But again, I go back to what I said earlier about Chad Scott. People are going to question, well, these hires might not be the ones that blow your skirt up from a football standpoint. We didn't outbid a long line of others to get these guys. There's more to it than football sometimes. The football part comes later, okay? But with Chad Scott, we talked about the infectious nature of the pixie dust we hope he can spread, okay? His personal touch on things. With Blaine, I think there's an element of that as well, based on, again, how he's tethered this program from a very young age at some of the most instrumental moments we've ever seen. Oh, and you were there firsthand. That night in the desert that you'll never forget, well, for the same reasons, he'll never forget. And it's special to him, just like it's special to you, and just like it's special to Mountaineer fans everywhere. And in a time when we're desperately searching for anything to put even a relative spring in our step, coming off the season we're coming off of, sign me up. Sign me up. I think he's going to bring value to the room. I think he's going to bring value to the staff, and I'm excited about the addition of Blaine Stewart. And here's the cherry on top. You want to put a nice little tight bow on it, Wes? Okay. We talked about where this connection between Blaine and Mike Tomlin began with Stu at VMI. Oh, by the way, new wide receiver coach on staff too. Where was he right before this?
VMI.
The football gods touch everything.
There we go. I love it. That's a good one there. No, you're right. And that's where I'm at too. Listen, I know there's a lot of people that it doesn't matter any good news in the portal, any good off-season momentum, if you want to call it, for WVU. People just aren't going to care. They're not going to want to hear it. They're not going to want to buy it until it translates to wins on the field. And if that's how you feel, yeah, fair enough. I'm not crushing you for that. But this is one of those things, like, I can't help but think that this is cool.
I'm excited to have Blaine around. For my own selfish reasons. Let me be completely transparent. You know, even if he brought nobody.
What's funny, Jed? What's funny, Jed? When you talk to him, you got to be like, hey, I do this podcast with this kid, Wes Euler. He's the guy who's always wearing WVU stuff on the Steelers plane that you're always like double taking. Like, wait, who's that guy sitting back there in the WVU hat?
I mean, I'll be honest with you.
That's happened with Blaine and I. I mean, I wear WVU stuff all the time. Steelers facilities, Steelers. I mean, you name it. I'm wearing WVU stuff probably 3 or 4 days out of the 7-day week. And the amount of times over the last 3-4 years that I've gotten the double take from Blaine Stewart, like, is that guy wearing a WVU hat? Is that guy wearing a WVU jet? Oh yeah, it's that same guy that I always see who does the show with Arthur Moats. Like,
I mean, I'd be slightly happy.
It'll be a funny full circle there.
Blaine was coming back to town to manage the Applebee's on Patterson Drive. I'd just be happy to have him. I want more of the Stewart family. That's all. You know,
that's right. That's right.
I'm just happy personally. But I truly feel it's a great addition to the staff beyond my personal connection to Stu's family or Blaine or anything else.
I got a funny story that you guys were telling me I need to collect those stories in the bank.
Yeah, hit us.
So I'm flying, and I think I was flying in the Dominican Republic, or maybe I was flying back. I can't remember. It was for my brother's wedding, but my younger brother Taylor's sitting next to me, and Joey Porter is sitting on the plane. And like, I try to strike up a conversation with him, and he's like not having it at all. Okay. So I'm like, yeah, dude, I know Blaine Stewart. No crap.
Really?
I was like, yeah, I was like, you know, Blaine's dad was my coach at West Virginia. I was like, he's a great dude. I was like, how's he doing? And that like kind of broke the ice. So I'd just like to thank Blaine for
That's awesome.
Wow, that's neat.
saving
That's
that,
neat.
that altercation on the plane.
The
There
man
you
that broke
go.
Joey Porter.
The man that broke
Wow.
Joey. Hey, it takes a lot. I tell you what, you got to have a soft spot in your heart to break Joey Porter. I tell you.
Dude, I'm
That's,
telling you
That's
what,
a good
man,
one.
a good
it
one.
was like he was not having the conversation, dude. And then I was
That's
like,
funny.
oh, I'm gonna pull my one ace out of the hole here. Hopefully this works.
That's funny. Yeah, and again, a reminder that like this is this has not been officially announced yet. It's been very
Yep.
credibly reported, but keep your eyes out for the official announcement because I got a feeling that'll be pretty cool. That'll be pretty special, and that'll tug on your heartstrings.
It's
And
almost like whatever construction you choose to put on this.
yeah,
And I can see people going one way or the other with it, but I think it says as much about where you're at personally right now. I mean, there's going to be people that are frustrated. And as you said, Wes, nothing in the off season is going to satisfy anybody until it actually translates some change on the field. But
We're making changes.
yeah, we're making changes. I mean, the effort's there. So let's continue down that path. Let's see where this goes. And until it does translate to those changes, it's not going to matter. But I just love me having some Blaine Stewart around. I'm glad to have a Stu back around on the staff, no doubt about it. The time that I used to spend, and even a couple years before you were there, when Rich was first getting the job and getting settled in, I would go into the quarterback meetings with Stu, and me and Rashid and Stu would watch tape, and it was just he was just one of a kind. He was just he's everything that you heard. He really is. I mean, it's everything that fans heard about Stu is what Stu was when you knew him personally, right, Owen?
Oh, he was one of the,
salt of
swellest
the earth, right?
big time salty there. Just an absolute gentleman. And he was a dad out there. One of those coaches that you'll never forget for that. And it's gives me butterflies a little bit thinking that Blaine's gonna have an opportunity to leave his legacy down on the WVU program.
It was what, Jed, two decades that Bill was involved with the WVU football program.
Close to it. In other words, he predated Rich, and
right.
So yeah,
and post dated Rich there as well.
Too. I even know some guys.
Hopefully it'll be as long of a reign for Blaine.
I even know some guys that played for Stu at VMI. A buddy of mine was a quarterback for him at VMI, and that I used to work with, and same types of stories came out of his mouth about Bill Stewart. It's just you are what you are, right? And that's what Stu is, and you know what? That's what Blaine is. And they're good folks, but more importantly for this conversation, he's a really good football coach. He's a really good football coach.
And you know what else he is, Jed? He's a proud West Virginian, right? Blaine Stewart. Well, our friends at GoMart, you like what I did there? Huh? That was pretty good, huh? They are a proud West Virginia-owned company here to keep you going. GoMart, make sure you're signing up for your GoMart rewards to get all the special deals and offers that they offer throughout the state of West Virginia at all the different GoMart locations. Yeah, pretty cool. That's definitely one that we're excited about. Maybe we'll put a bow on this conversation in the next episode if that's all finalized here in the next week or so. I did want to mention too, for those who haven't seen it, because it's about 10 years old. I mean, it was around the time that Stu passed away, which has been a little over 10 years now. Yeah. If you haven't seen, NFL Films did a really cool piece, and I mean, it's 7 or 8 minutes long. It's not something that's going to take you a couple hours to watch. It's like 7 or 8 minutes long. NFL Films did it on the Mike Tomlin, Bill Stewart, Blaine Stewart relationship. And if you just go to YouTube and type in Bill Stewart, Mike Tomlin, I guarantee you it'll pop up. If you're a WVU fan, if you're a Steelers fan, if you're a both, if you're a neither, honestly, it's worth your time. It's really cool. And that'll
one caveat, Wes. Kleenex
paint a
warning
good
for
picture.
that thing. Kleenex warning for that.
Yes.
I'm telling you.
Kleenex warning for sure. Someone's
Ooh.
cutting onions. Some things are getting dusty. I've seen that thing probably a dozen times, and every time, I mean, it cuts me right to the core. So if you want a little bit more on that cool story in the background of the relationship there that we've kind of alluded to and touched on a little bit.
Let me ask Owen real fast. I don't know the answer to this. Was Blaine in the locker room for the speech, Owen? Do you remember? He was on the field, and
He might have been. Honestly, he could have been. Those
You have
kids
to go back and check the video.
Those kids were part of the family, man. They were
Yeah.
in and out all over the place. So, I don't know if, I can't fact check it. I mean, I'd have to look back at the movie or something, or he'd have to tell me.
Interesting. Well, like I said, make sure you're checking all that out on YouTube if you want a little more background. As we wrap this up, a thank you. This episode also brought to you all in part by our friends at Fortis. Roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed. Visit fortis.us.com for all your commercial roofing needs. Gentlemen, this has been fun. And speaking of YouTube, our guy Jed has been putting in yeoman's work, I tell you. All right, so go on YouTube, check out Bill Stewart, Mike Tomlin, check out that NFL Films video, and then go to the In the Gun podcast page, subscribe, because once we hit 1,000 subscribers there, we're going to do some type of cool giveaway. Our guy Jed's been plugging away at these YouTube shorts on our YouTube channel. Some cool history stuff there. There's some stuff on Owen. There's some all kinds of stuff you've been working on, Jed. Some uniform combination trivia. Some really cool different stuff.
I might have some Blaine and Karen Stewart stuff on there before it's over. It's like,
there we go. That's what I'm talking about. So listen, it's the off season, but we've got plenty going for you. And so make sure you're in lockstep with us on all of our different social media channels, but particularly on YouTube, where we got a bunch of cool stuff coming your way. That'll do it for this edition of ITG. Thanks to all of our sponsors again who make this possible. Gentlemen, this was fun. Next week, like I said, hopefully we'll have a Big 12 schedule. If not, we'll find something to talk about. We'll find something to unpack. We're going to be here for you all off season. But exciting.
We're excited
times.
about the change, right? We're excited about the OC
yes.
change. We gave our reasons. We're excited about having Blaine and Karen Stewart dialed back in. We're excited about where the staff's landed. Now let's just see where this thing can go, right?
Now we're hopeful we'll get a schedule here sometime in the next week or two.
Yeah.
For Owen Schmidt and Jed Jennings, I'm Wesley Euler. Thanks as always for listening, everybody. And the one thing that we ask of you is to be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. Everybody enjoy the weekend, and we'll talk to you guys next week. You've been In the Gun.